Hello, interpreters. This is Mason, the interpreter. If you are wondering whether you should work as a freelance interpreter or an interpreter who works scheduled shifts, you have come to the right place. In this video, I am going to talk about the differences between the two and which one is better for you and why. Let's get started. So I am actually making this video because I received a message on LinkedIn yesterday about this. She was one of the interpreters that I trained in the past, and she sent me a message asking, is being a freelance interpreter better than a full-time or part-time interpreter? Which is an excellent question, right? I answered her already, but I thought this would be something that can benefit other interpreters who might be going through similar stuff. So I decided to make a video on this topic. Let's first talk about the characteristics of freelance interpreting. I am currently working as a 100% freelance interpreter. I used to work scheduled shifts, but for many different reasons, I decided to take only freelance positions. Well, since I only do freelance, it must mean freelance is definitely better, right? No, not quite. I will get back to this later in the video. When you are working as a freelance interpreter, you get paid per minute of the call that you are interpreting. Freelance positions typically requires no commitment. What does this mean? It means no minimum hours, 4 hours a day, 6 hours a day, 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week, etc. It also means we do not have to worry about the shift adherence, which is the #1 cause of conflicts between interpreters and the companies. For those of you who don't know what a shift adherence is, it basically means how well you follow and stick to your shift hours. For example, let's say you have a scheduled shift that goes from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Interpreting service providers, which I will simply call them companies here, will not like you if you sleep in and clock in late at 10:30 for obvious reasons. Often these companies will have a set number of interpreters that need to be available during certain hours of the day. Typically, a lot more interpreters are needed during the US business hours like 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So if you are an interpreter who is not able to commit all your time fully, for example, you often have to call in sick because of your baby, or you have a sporadic side gig that you have to attend to, then not having to worry about this adherence will be really nice for you. Now, here are some characteristics of scheduled shifts. Typically, companies ask for a minimum 20 hours per week. One shift could be 2 hours long or 4 hours long, 8 hours. Generally, they don't go over 40 hours a week, although that really depends on the company. Unlike freelance interpreters, you get paid per hour for scheduled shifts. Then it is important to note that it pays even when you are not on a call. Some big companies have shifts like 24/7, so many interpreters choose scheduled shifts outside of that typical US business hours, which is once again something like 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So your call volume is still low, but you still get paid the same. Some companies might provide some types of employee benefits, such as paid time off, vacation fee, extended healthcare benefit, etc., but it is definitely not common, and this is a fastly dying trend in the industry from my observation. If you are a 1099, meaning a contractor interpreter, generally we don't get any typical employee benefits. I have seen companies that provided some benefits to interpreters who work full-time, scheduled shifts in the past, like 35 hours or more. But once again, I think this is not common and rapidly disappearing in this industry. I know there was a lot of information that I just threw at you. I will make it simple by going over the pros and cons. So let's get to it. Let's first look at the upsides of freelance interpreting. And of course, as you can imagine, the good things that I say about freelance will usually be the bad things for scheduled shift and vice versa, right? So I tried my best to get rid of the redundant information. I believe flexibility is for sure the greatest benefit that you get from working freelance. When I say flexibility, I am really talking about your time and freedom. You can sleep in when you don't feel well. You can go to the gym or go grocery shopping when it's not a rush hour, packed with other people who just got off work at 4:30, right? That being said, I do need to warn you that great flexibility comes with great responsibility. We will talk about the consequences later when you don't live up to that responsibility. But if you are able to utilize this flexibility properly, I think you will have great work-life balance, and essentially this means you will be satisfied with your job, which really should mean a lot to many people. Next is job satisfaction. What I mean by that is, in my opinion, and from my observation of other interpreters, I wholeheartedly believe it is much easier to be happy with this job as a freelance interpreter than an interpreter who works a scheduled shift. If you think about it, it is not that hard to picture it. When you have no scheduled shifts that you have to work, you get to wake up when you want to. You have more than enough time to get yourself a nice cup of tea, coffee, snack, whatever that is before you start taking on calls. Maybe you just had an exhausting call, you log yourself right off and take a moment to de-stress. All of this is a luxury to interpreters who have to work the scheduled shifts with back-to-back calls and a strict adherence policy. Next is higher pay rate. You see the asterisk sign there, right? The star sign that I put. I added that because I want you to listen to my explanation and not get confused by this. What do I mean by higher pay rate? Generally speaking, if a company offers you both position, freelance and scheduled shifts, your pay rate that you get paid per minute will be slightly higher than the per hour wage when you convert this. For instance, if you're getting 50 to 60 cents per minute as a freelance, that will be $30 per hour when you convert it. But for obvious reasons, the company will only pay around $18 to $22 for scheduled shifts, which is far less than $30 because you don't always get a high call volume with freelance. Now, let's have a look at the upside of working scheduled shifts. Number one is going to be income stability. Income stability is honestly one of the most important aspects, especially if you are a full-time interpreter who has bills to pay. I cannot stress this enough. Of course, this income stability comes from your time and work. You're only getting paid stable income because you are being forced to work your shifts. But I can tell you, not having to worry about not making enough for this month is definitely a huge load off of your chest, and so many new interpreters tend to overlook or minimize how important stable income is, in my opinion. Next is work experience. What do I mean by this? This will matter a lot more if you are just starting out as an interpreter and in need of experience. Because of the high call volume you get when you work scheduled shifts, you will be far more experienced than freelance interpreters if they work the same hours. I started out with scheduled shifts, and I have to say, I really learned a lot from taking difficult, challenging calls during those times. So if you are someone who is starting out and looking for more experience, I do think scheduled shifts will be able to give you a lot more experience than the freelance positions. And the last point is higher income. Now, you must be really confused with this after my explanation about higher pay rate earlier, but let me explain further. What I mean by income here is the number you see on your pay stub, the number you see in your bank account statement. It is your take-home pay. Generally speaking, interpreters with scheduled shifts will make more money, simply because they work more hours. You might think, oh, but I can just work really hard as a freelance interpreter, and since I am making more, I can get paid more too. This is true and correct, but definitely easier said than done. Alongside with the income stability, this higher paycheck is really going to help you finding the financial ground when you work as a full-time interpreter. We talked about the upsides, and now let's talk about the downsides as well. As I mentioned, what I mentioned as pros for freelance would automatically be the downsides for scheduled shifts and vice versa in most cases, so I would like you to think about those on top of what I have to say. First, Pay discrepancy. What does this mean? One of the biggest hassles that all freelance interpreters will experience is that they have to log their calls. Nowadays, many companies offer an electronic log of all calls received, but still, you will want to double check that you are getting paid for the calls you serviced. I know many companies wouldn't deliberately not pay their interpreters or pay them less, but it is definitely our responsibilities as a freelance interpreter to double check if the pay stub is free of any clerical errors, which just adds stress. Another big one is downtime, or I sometimes call it wasted time. Working as a freelance interpreter means you understand you will not be prioritized when it comes to call volume. Who gets the priorities? Interpreters with scheduled shifts. Why? Because they are cheaper. When new interpreters get hired, they care so much about the pay rate, but not too much about the call volume, which is not too difficult to imagine. Why? Because pay rate is tangible. It is written in your email. Even before you get hired, it's in your contract. Call volume, you only get to really find out once you start working. That's why many new interpreters start their first freelance interpreting job thinking, oh, I make this amount of per minute, so if I get 240 minutes per day, that's this amount, and I make this per month, blah blah blah. This fantasy that felt like a reasonable plan will start shattering once they start working and you just don't get any calls for like 45 minutes. What happened to those 45 minutes? Nothing. You just spent it watching YouTube videos while waiting for a call. Fast forward 1 month later, you get your first paycheck of whopping $213 for the entire month. This happens, and this is not sustainable. I am sure I will make many more videos about how to use this downtime or wasted time wisely or make it not wasted. But if you are not planned for it, this will become the biggest downside that will drag you down financially. Let's have a look at the downside for schedule shifts now. First thing would be fixed income. What does this mean? As an interpreter who works a fixed schedule, your take-home pay will not vary much. Yes, you might be able to go overtime here and there because frankly, overtime happens quite often for interpreters, but even then, your paycheck will look more or less the same. Some might not hate this, but some, including myself, might find this very limiting. When your income gets fixed, you end up trying to find ways to increase your income, which is often done by simply working more overtime or raising your pay rate, which are both difficult in many different ways as an interpreter with scheduled shifts. Lastly, the biggest downside for me is the stress. I think this goes along the same line as getting greater job satisfaction with freelance work. If you have done interpreting work with scheduled shifts, if you have done back-to-back interpreting calls for hours, you know what it is. It is tough. You get exhausted, both physically and mentally. I think I can confidently say that this would be the number one reason why new interpreters who quit within the first couple of months of work. It gets so stressful to the point we burn out and think, I'm not getting paid enough for this shit. And there it goes, our career down the drain. Here I made up some examples for you to see which one of the options would suit our candidates best. I'd like you to also try answering it yourself. This is Pam. She's 25 years old. She is single and has no other jobs. But she has friends and needs her social life. She wants to hang out with her friends who get off work at 5 p.m. What do you think? Should she work as a freelance interpreter or should she work scheduled shifts? In my opinion, she should take scheduled shifts. Wait a moment, but we said she wants work-life balance. Does that mean she should be a freelance interpreter? I think it is a common misconception that a freelance worker always has the best work-life balance. I mean, it is definitely possible and plausible for sure, but for someone who is not married, not in a domestic relationship, has no other jobs, I think Pam will want to work, make money, spend money, and save money. To do that, she will want to have that income stability we talked about. Obviously, this is not the answer, and there can be many different answers for her, but I just want to explain what my reasoning is in this specific case. Let's try another one. Here's Michael. He is married and has a child. He is a homemaker, meaning he stays at home while his spouse goes work. He cleans and cooks when he is not working. He drops his child off at a daycare or kindergarten in the morning, and later he picks them up too. He is a freelance graphic designer as well, so the work schedule can fluctuate. I think this is easy to guess. Definitely a freelance in my opinion. Especially having a second job, Michael will be able to really utilize his spare time when he is not working as a graphic designer or just whenever he gets that extra time in his day. Knowing that he does a lot of the housework during the day and has a spouse who is working full time, I think it is fair to assume that Michael's focus might not be making as much money as possible, but rather he wants to make some money to help with household expenditures and budgeting and stuff like that. Let's have a look at the third example. This is Angela. She is married but has no kids. She doesn't have any other jobs, but she just loves playing video games. When it comes to work, she has hard time focusing and she is prone to procrastinating. What do you think? Personally, I would recommend Angela to take scheduled shifts. Why? Because she finds it difficult to push herself to work. I don't want to call this lazy because this is just natural. And I have been there myself as an interpreter all the time, even this morning. As I mentioned, you get these perks of flexibility with freelance work. You get to sleep in. You get to take a day off when you don't feel well. You get to prioritize other things because there is no one yelling at you or getting you fired because you didn't show up, right? But if you seriously lack willpower to push yourself to get out of bed early, set a daily quota, and try your best to meet that goal every day, all of those perks of being a freelance interpreter I mentioned earlier will backfire you when it is time to pay your bills. If you know you just don't have that willpower or the grit to really push yourself, I think it will be a smart move to get your schedule fixed so you are going to be tempted less. Remember, great flexibility comes with great responsibility. In my opinion, identifying and acknowledging your limit can be a very difficult and humbling experience. But I do believe that this is something that will make her better off in the long run. Here's the last example. Ryan is 28 years old. He's single, he lives alone, and he is 100% all in on his career as an interpreter. He sees his future in this, he is invested, he's driven, and he prioritizes income and boosting his career. What should he do? Here, I would personally recommend him to go on that freelance route, or if he can, even do both, freelance and scheduled shifts. Because Ryan here is ambitious. He's ready for that work grind. If I were him, I would start my day early, take on as many calls as possible, keep applying to different companies, expand my network, attend seminars and webinars, get education, and work on my certifications. This is basically what I've been doing to boost my career, and I cannot say it was an easy thing to do. But if you believe that this is the career that you want to have, I really think this is the way. I have compiled the points I talked about in this video. I don't think I will go over again, so if you skipped the explanation part, you can always go back and find out what I was saying. To talk about my situation, I currently work at 5 different companies as a freelance interpreter, which is to keep that flexibility and job satisfaction, while I have enough call volume to bring in stable income. By doing this, you can really optimize utilizing your time and still earning solid, stable income. Now, here is the truth bomb I will throw at you. As I mentioned earlier, this is not going to be easy. Many companies will require you to have experience and even certifications in some cases. At first, You might not even be offered with a freelance position. When you do get the offer, it might be insultingly low. That's just not going to work out when you do the math. I understand this because I have been there. It's tough. But remember, Rome wasn't built in a day. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes patience and even luck sometimes. Whether it is freelance or schedule shift, I really don't think there is one solve it all answer. It really depends on who you are, what you can handle, and where you are in your life. That was it for today. Right now, I am getting pretty close to hitting 1,000 subscribers. If you can help out by subscribing to my channel, I will put up more videos like this. Thank you, and I will see you in the next video. Interpreter disconnecting. Bye bye.